I think this is good.
So welcome to everyone. We thought it would be great to recognize Mary, who just never gets as much recognition as she deserves on her birthday, and how fun to be able to see or hear you all virtually. This is great. This is a new experiment for us, and
Thanks, Barbara.
It's kind of casual. We have a few things that we're going to do intentionally. Oh, there's Susan. Welcome. And we may have more than one Mary or other people show up as well. One of the things that one of the things we do have planned is
Miss Anthony. I can't figure out how to do this.
You're okay.
You're doing it fine. We can see and hear you.
You were always such a
Barbara, are you on a phone? Are you on a phone, Barbara?
There I am.
Oh, her picture's there. She's on the thing.
There I am.
I was just going to say, if you're on a phone, sometimes if you move the phone horizontal, you'll lose those bars on either side. But we can see you.
Yeah, do that and then come back.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh, and look, Clara Barton has arrived.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh,
Just
good.
in time.
I wasn't sure if I had the picture thing up or not, but I'm glad to see I do.
We can see you. It's great. So I think we're going to first invite Christine Rudovsky, Rochester city historian, who's done a lot of research about Mary. We just said, in tribute, in honor of Mary's birthday, Christine, what would you like us to know about Mary?
Well, I want you to know that Mary is awesome, first of all. I have, as Deborah mentioned, been doing a lot of research on Mary for the past several years now, and it's really been enlightening for me to learn just how large of a figure she was, not only in the suffrage movement, but in reform movements of all kinds. And I've really come to the conclusion that Susan and Mary were partners in the movement to a much greater extent than Mary receives credit for. When we talk about Mary, it's often in the context of Mary being the sort of domestic support who stayed home and took care of the house so Susan could be out doing her work. But Mary was a force in her own right. I mean, she was a teacher in the city schools for more than 30 years. As early as 1859, she fought for equal pay with a man and was probably the first female principal to be paid equal to a man in the city. That was at School 14. After she retired in 1883, she founded the Rochester Women's Political Club, which would go on to be the Political Equality Club. And she and her colleagues would work to organize these clubs all over the area and all over New York State. And it was these clubs in the local areas that really did the boots on the ground kind of work to gather petitions, to present their case to the New York State legislature, particularly in 1894 when the state had their constitutional convention. And at that time, the headquarters for the New York State Women's Suffrage Association and for the movement for the Constitutional Convention were located in Mary's house, and she was serving as secretary of the state association. So these are things that I don't think people really realize about Mary, that she was an active force in the women's suffrage movement here in Rochester and New York State. But she also was involved in temperance. She was involved in the New York State Teachers Association, where she fought for equal education and integration for African American students, equal education for girls. She was involved in the Rochester Charitable Society, Female Charitable Society. So this woman was she was not sitting at home taking care of the house. She was very, very busy. And so I am so grateful that we're able to celebrate her today. And I thank you for allowing me to be part of this.
You're here.
You're here. We can raise a cup of non-distilled spirits to Mary. We invited Clara Barton to come in because, Clara, maybe you could tell us a little bit about you and about your relationship or connection with Mary Anthony.
Well, I was very interested with Mary in the rights of women, and I believe I must have been born believing in the full right of all women to all the privileges and positions which nature and justice record to her in common with other human beings. And I have already been in the fight with American presidents to authorize but in equal with that, I've been out promoting people, and now that I got the Red Cross authorized in 1881, I've been able to devote more time with Mary and Susan in promoting for the rights of women. This is, I've been able to visit Mary at the Rochester home, and I am a nurse, but I've been interested in teaching, and part of nursing is teaching other people about healthcare. And it pertains to today and the next century for washing hands and just for caring for people, any injured person from any cause. And actually, American women not having the right to vote is an injury to their persona, and mental health is very important also. So this has been a privilege for me to have more campaigns to work on besides the American Red Cross, which that will be part of me forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. I know so many people know that the Red Cross was founded in Dansville, New York, and that was your hometown at the time, and that's chapter 1 of the Red Cross. But I'll bet a lot of the people here at Mary's birthday party would be interested to know where chapter 2 of the Red Cross is.
Well, you know, it's in Rochester, New York.
And I understand that you and Mary helped draft the papers to get Rochester registered as chapter 2 of the American Red Cross, and that you actually did that at what was then 7 Madison Street, but we now know that as 17 Madison Street. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's very correct. And I also, Clara was involved with nursing as part of the Red Cross, and she spoke at the 1902 Convention of Nurses right in Rochester, New York. And Mary came to that convention also, because she would support me with the right to get nurses licensed in New York State and to get further recognized, and for equal pay for nurses as well as she had done for teachers.
Great. It's wonderful to know that connection, because Clara Barton's certainly well known by a lot of people, but they might not know there's this wonderful Rochester connection. And they didn't know that you were a suffragist for your adult years and were a wonderful advocate for votes for women. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I think once you're an advocate, you are an advocate. It doesn't ever leave you. You don't retire from that. You may retire from your official work, like I retired officially from the Red Cross, but I could not retire from advocacy for women in all areas.
So Clara, will you be joining us for the Suffragette City Parade this September?
I sure will. I've got September 12th on my calendar.
You got to work in a commercial.
And I keep my uniform fresh in case it's ever needed.
That's wonderful. Great.
In fact, many people know me as Clara Barton, and I don't even need to have my name on. The Red Cross, they say, "Hi, Clara."
Oh, that's
so
great.
that's good.
You're here. Well, I understand. Go ahead.
May I add something just to Christine's comments about Mary before we move on?
Sure, Sally, jump in.
Thanks. So I had just given a presentation, I think it was the last presentation at the library before the lockdown, on the women that voted with Susan B. Anthony. So I was able to dig in and do a lot of research, and Christine knows this has been kind of a pet project of mine. But one of the things that I liked about Mary that I discovered was she was really into this idea of women paying taxes without being represented. And I just wanted to read to you something that was in the newspaper, because she would actually pay her taxes and always go on record that she was in protest about this. So she said, not a man in the state, ever so poor, ever so ignorant, ever so drunk, ever so debased in any form outside of prison doors, who is not a taxpayer, but welcomed and urged to cast his ballot toward the making of the laws that suit him best. Every woman in the state, be she ever so intelligent, ever so sober, ever so moral, ever so large a taxpayer, is denied that right. I pay the enclosed county tax, $16.36 for 1902 under protest. Please record it.
Thank you, Celia. We have a wonderful letter from Mary's nurse, who was both nurse for Susan and then for Mary when Mary died from lymphoma a year after Susan. And she wrote to say that when Mary was in her sick bed, it came to her, the nurse, to Margaret Shanks, to take the payment for Mary's taxes, and she reported that there were tears in the tax collector's eyes when he realized Mary couldn't come make her protest in person.
Oh.
And I understand that newspapers
That's
would print her
terrific.
protest every year, so she was making her
Mhm.
public statement. So at one point, after the turn of the century, probably right around 1905 or 1906, Susan had an idea to give a gift to Mary that could make her even better at organizing, educating, and agitating. And I'm going to toss it a little bit over now to Christina Kaiser, who's actually on Madison Street in Mary's office, just off the back parlor. So Christina, tell us the surprise you have.
Hello, everyone. Thrilled to be here. Happy birthday, Mary. So we have today, let's see if I can get this camera flipped around. Alrighty. Here we are in Mary's office, but we have a very special gift that Susan gave to Mary, and we haven't installed it yet, but this is the telephone that she gave Mary as a gift. It wasn't a birthday gift, correct, Deborah?
Not that we know correct, but
Okay.
The University of Rochester Division of Rare Books acquired a letter where Susan B. Anthony was writing that she had given Mary a phone, and she tells us where she put it in that office off the parlor. And she said Mary right away got to work calling people and organizing, and she couldn't imagine how much more effective Mary was going to be now that she could reach out to the world. So the Strong Museum was deaccessioning some of their collection, and we said, gee, we would love that phone that's circa 1906, and we would like to put it into Mary's office. So you are the first ones to know about what is going to be soon installed in Mary's office, and it's the telephone just like the one that Mary used. And Susan, you were so smart to get Mary on board with that technology.
This that we're on today.
This is a little beyond the wooden telephone, but while you're there in the office, Christina, anything else you want to show us?
I can show you. Oh, almost lost my tripod. So we have, here we are. We've got Clara Barton featured.
Oh, right in that room where they wrote the charter for the second chapter of the Red Cross.
Yep.
Excellent.
And then we've got Rhoda DeGarmo, correct?
Yep, and Rhoda DeGarmo, who was at the farm next to the Anthony farm before they moved to Madison Street, which is a documented Underground Railroad site. And Rhoda was born in 1798 or 99, and was also one of those women who marched down Madison Street and voted in 1872.
Excellent. And then we've got the sewing machine over here.
And that's the sewing machine that Mary and Susan gave as a wedding gift to Anna Dan when she was becoming Anna Dan Mason, when the wedding was in the house and the only man present at the wedding was the groom. And Anna Dan Mason was still alive in 1945 when we founded the Anthony Memorial, and she thought that the sewing machine should come home.
Yeah, so that's my brief tour of Mary's study.
And we're sorry that we can't be there with you, but we're all maintaining our distance.
Oh, yes.
So thank you for being able or being willing to be there for us on our every time.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Deborah, you're muted.
Thank you. Sarah, I think you were going to tell us a little about something and cue something up for us, perhaps? or am I doing that?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Actually, I have two. Deborah, that last story fascinated me, that the only man in the room was the groom, which leads me to wonder, at that time in history, was there a woman who could marry them?
There were. Anna Howard Shaw had been ordained at that point. I believe she's the person who officiated. There also were Quaker ministers who would officiate as well. And there were some people, like at that point, Helen Barrett Montgomery had been licensed as a preacher at Lake Avenue Baptist Church.
Oh, good.
So the question about whether the city would allow that to be registered might be a different issue. But there were definitely there were ordained women as early as the 1870s.
And then the other question is, and I might have missed this, and excuse me if I did, but in all this talk of Mary, did Mary actually go down to the voting booth with Susan to vote?
She did.
Good.
All right, Sarah, do you want to tell us a little bit about this, or maybe we could have Lola talk about it too?
Yes, absolutely. Well, Lola is welcome to, I can't see her face anymore. She's welcome to step in. I'll introduce her. Lola DeSantis is one of our docents. She is a student at Mercy High School, and she is completely focused and enamored, focused on and enamored of women's history. And she has created a TikTok, which is an account on a social media platform that is unfamiliar to me until she introduced me, wherein you can post these 1-minute videos. And Lola has created a channel called Herstory Daily, where she features these curated videos she makes about women of note. And she shared with me this one that she created for Mary Anthony's birthday, which I'll play in just a moment. And because, Lola, I can't see your face, will you let me know if you'd like to say something more about it? Is she there? Let's see. That's okay. So we will thank her for doing that. And everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
193rd birthday of Mary S. Anthony, an educator, suffragist, and women's rights activist. While Mary is not as well known as her older sister Susan B. Anthony, her story is just as important. The two of them lived together in Rochester, New York for much of their adult lives, and Mary helped support them through her work as a teacher. Each year when it was time to pay the taxes, Mary Anthony would write underneath her signature, "Paid under protest. Taxation without representation is still tyranny." She was also the first woman principal in Rochester, New York to earn the same as her male counterpart, seeing that she would not accept the promotion unless she received equal pay. In addition to this, she was a member of the National Women's Suffrage Association, president of the Political Equality Club of Rochester, illegally voted with her sister in 1872, and much, much more. Happy birthday, Mary Anthony, and if you're ever in Rochester, make sure to come visit her house on Madison Street. Today, April...
Bravo!
Woohoo! Woohoo! Well done, Lola.
Woo, bravo!
And it's my understanding that Mary DeLise and Lola, Mary DeLise is also with us, and another one of our docents, have done a number of those Herstory TikTok projects together. Is that correct? So we thought...
Yes, actually, we did an Anthony Sisters one together, and we used the song from the Schuyler Sisters, and this is my sister. She was in that one too. And we were the three Anthony sisters, but as the Schuyler Sisters from Hamilton.
And Lola, you were the person featured in the play that was written for the RPO for their women's suffrage presentation back in January.
Oh, yes.
And Mary DeLise is our younger Susan B. Anthony that we often see on the dais or leading the parade or doing other things. And it's so much fun to have you interpreting history in these new ways that we can push out and access. And maybe you can teach us how to do something too. That would be great.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Susan, would you like to say a word in honor of Mary?
Well, I was thinking this morning that the one thing I regret is that it was she who soothed me and smoothed my hair as I passed away. And I wish it had been the other way around. I wish I had been able to soothe her instead. But she was I've learned the phrase from all of you in your modern world, the wind beneath my wings. And I loved her dearly and always respected everything she did. And in fact, depended upon her in many ways. And I thank all of you for celebrating her.
Yeah, I think, Susan, if Mary hadn't had such a famous sister who, as you have often said, you could have never done what you did without Mary,
Yes.
we would all be visiting the Mary S. Anthony House in Rochester, because she's worthy of having a location. And the truth is, of course, Susan never owns the house. Their mother, Lucy, did, and then Mary did. So
That's right. That's right. Well, perhaps someday we'll have an entire room dedicated to dear Mary.
That's great. Well, we have a few more minutes, and we thought we would open it up if anybody wanted to say anything that's a tribute to Mary or anything for the good cause, and then we'll wrap up with clicking all our microphones and sing a happy birthday to Mary. So anybody want to jump in and share anything?
No, the coloring book, the coloring.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Go to the coloring page.
Have you colored your pages? Let's see your pages.
Oh, wow.
May I ask a question? This is Linda in Buffalo.
Hi, Linda.
Hi. So I noticed that there's 7 years age difference between Mary and Susan, which is a lot. And I just wondered if Susan B. would comment on that. Were they always close, even though there was such a big age difference, or did it grow more as they got older?
Well, you might say that. However, as we grew older, I was away more. So it was really important that we were close from the beginning. And, you know, we women stuck together as sisters. I wonder if Colleen Hurst might make a comment on that. I'm not sure.
Emily, can you unmute? Can you unmute your screen?
Who? Oh, Colleen? Yes.
Emily and Colleen are muted right now.
Oh.
Lower left, unmute.
There you go.
Okay.
Oh, you're muted again. There.
There you
okay.
go.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Speak, Mother.
Oh, well, I'm just enjoying this so much, and I'm so impressed with this wonderful program that you have gotten together to put on and get out to everyone. And I think that it's great to see Mary being recognized for part, at least, of what she did through those years. And I don't think that, as Susan said, she could never have done what she did if she hadn't had Mary behind her all years on end to see that everything was running right, that she had clothes when she got home to go on to the next stop, that all those practical things were taken care of, and that she was valued so much by Mary, no matter what she did. Also, Mary was a really good businesswoman, and she loaned money, I know, to them from time to time, besides doing presents. But when they were doing the revolution, I know she helped to keep it afloat for some time. So, as you have showed, she's so little known, but she was so important. Thank you.
I just like to say to Ira that I hope you're taking notes, since he is planning to expand the play, the 1848 play, and include more of Mary and the rest of the Anthony family, and maybe. And so this is a good resource for him.
Yes. And Emily, I've spoken with your mother about this just yesterday, and she's given me some good ideas, and perhaps I can convince her to be my co-author in this next project.
Oh, dear. Well, the work never ends when it comes to women's stuff.
That's right. That's so right.
Can I get another question in?
Come on in.
I was wondering, since we are currently in the real world that we're in today, in the year of the plague, I was
Yes.
wondering if there was any effect on the suffragette movement by the 1918 influenza, which was just a little bit before the right to vote came along. Is there any influence? I can't imagine what it would be, but I'm just curious if it had any influence on anything.
Less voters.
Well,
That's what I wondered. I wonder if maybe they figured, boy, we got to get somebody who can vote. I don't know.
Well, Jack, if we look at the movement closer to World War I, and then even through the time of the plague, of course, it's long after Mary and Susan are gone.
Right.
But people don't know that there were a number of women and nurses who couldn't get commissioned by the United States. Women who were physicians and women who were nurses couldn't get commissioned to go and help with the armed services in Europe. And the National American Women's Suffrage Association raised $600,000 to pay to send American nurses and doctors who were women who were then stationed in France.
Wow.
Similarly, when we look back at the Civil War, it was the women's suffrage movement that organized the hundreds of thousands of petitions in support of the passage of the 13th Amendment. So they were a movement that always was intentional, but also was always engaged in what was happening around them, and
Right.
saying, okay, this is what we have to deal with now, and this is what's most important, while continuing the slow move forward
Right.
for justice.
It doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Not at all. I'd love to know more about, anybody who knows more about what 1918, because I'm sure that there's direct connections. It's such a.
Well, I know I never knew my grandfather because of it. That's one thing I know. He died when my mother was only 4 years old. So, you know. But there's a lot of stories like that, I'm sure.
Well, and the plague that was a longer plague that was the closest to the Anthony family was tuberculosis, because Susan lost two of her sisters to tuberculosis. And I find it so interesting that though they were married, they moved back to Madison Street with their families for their palliative care. And I think that tells us a little bit about how close the family was.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to jump in before we comments, questions, or anything?
Just a question. Is that hat based on what Mary used to wear? I love that hat.
No. So this hat had its birth because of the Pasadena Rose Parade this year.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes, the 100, I was one of the outwalkers, and all 100 of us had to wear Edwardian white walking costumes, which of course has nothing to do with Susan B. Anthony at all. And I'm not sure when I'll wear it again, but probably sometime in 2020, you will see me and Emily, my spouse, in our white outfits. And it was required that we wear a hat that was a straw hat, and that should be decorated. And so I selected to have purple and yellow roses on my straw hat. I have to say, it started in January, and we got up at 2 a.m. on New Year's Day to gather for the parade, and the hat had this wonderful flair. But by the time we got to the end of the 5-mile march, which was rapid, I had dog ears of this. And even when I put the hat on, I left a rose here and there on my way across the room, because the 21st century glue doesn't hold on the weight of all these roses going forward.
It made for good television. That's the important thing.
Yeah, there you go.
So I just did a quick Google of the effect of the 1918 flu on the suffragette movement, and an article came up from the Smithsonian Magazine on smithsonianmag.com, titled "How the 1918 Flu Pandemic Helped Advance Women's Rights," and the subtitle is, "Whilst the virus disproportionately affected young men, women stepped into public roles that hadn't previously been open to them." So
Thank you. Wonderful. And a good source too, Bruce. Thank you.
Oh, that's good.
So it's like a Rosie the Riveter several years earlier, kind of.
Looks like it.
In a similar way, the connection between nursing was that the feminists in the 19th century had identified nursing as the profession that might be able to take women the furthest professionally. The horrible opportunity was the Civil War, when many of the male nurses didn't want to go out on the field because disease was killing more people than gunshot or injury had. And so, that's when women like Nightingale and Clara Barton and others introduced sanitation practices and care. And it was during the course of that women demonstrated they had an executive center, and they were good administrators, and they could function, and they were more courageous in some cases than the men. And in the history of women's suffrage, you can read about the irony that when Dorothea Dix was put in charge of the nurses and the Civil War forces, the nurses were all men, and a woman couldn't supervise a man. So here she was in charge of a corps that wouldn't respond to what her job required her to ask them to do. And then most of the women who were serving as nurses and were funding their own volunteer work out on the field and introducing all this in, and it turned people's hearts. There's a quote I love, Clara, from you at the end of the century when you were speaking to some Civil War veterans about suffrage, and you said, when you were weak, when I was weak, and when you were weak and I was strong, I stood by you and yours. Now we are weak and you are strong, and I ask you to stand by me and mine.
That's great.
I think we showed our strength as women during the Civil War, because we, the nurses, stayed on the battlefield until the last wounded soldier was taken care of. So we were strong, we stayed.
And one of those Civil War hospitals was City Hospital, right on West Main Street.
Yes.
Which the women who went to vote in 1872 would have walked right past City Hospital on their way to that spot to vote. Well,
Yes,
I think
and the prejudice about ability to rule or lead and to be paid after the war also fell upon Miss Tubman, who did extraordinary nursing as well and had to fight for any recompense.
Yeah, we're only beginning to learn about what incredible influence and impact Harriet Tubman had in so many different ways.
Yes, I believe after she was up in the North and the Civil War had ended, she actually opened up an infirmary for elderly people who had been born into slavery.
Yes, that's the museum that exists in your day now, in Auburn, New York.
Well, should we sing? Should we dare? I have no idea what happens when we're all slightly delayed in digital, and I think it will probably resound like crazy. But dare we all unmute ourselves and try to sing "Happy Birthday"? And
Absolutely.
Is there anybody who can carry a tune better than I? Susan, will you start us?
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday,
dear Mary. Happy birthday
to you.
Okay, we now know that doesn't work very well, but well done, well done.
That's going to raise the dead.
It certainly worked for me.
Well, we were glad to have all of you here at this party, our first annual Mary Anthony Zoom birthday. We are going to put some of the stuff on Facebook, so you can share it later, we hope. But thank you so much for making the time and joining us and bringing yourselves
Thank you.
to honor Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
I hope we'll do it again next year.
Yes, failure isn't possible.
Next year in person.
The parade.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the parade.
That's good.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
The Christine Rudovsky is the one who was
Yes.
Back to Mount Hope for me.
Have a good nap, dear.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, yes. We'll talk to you all soon.
Bye. I think I can hit end all.
And